Well, putting aside the refugee issue, no, not refugee, asylum seekers, I guess, is what they're called. No, the homeless problem in New York City is pretty much the same. Single adult population, have multiple issues. It's not, I don't think housing is the reason why they became homeless for the most part. Maybe in an earlier time where there was tons and tons of boarding houses and flop houses in a city like New York, maybe, people wouldn't be as homeless or as much homelessness. I should try to speak English, and Mitch is here. So I have to try a little harder. You're an Irish guy, so I don't have to try so hard with you. No one understands what the hell you're saying. But when Mitch talks, it's like an elocution class. Anyway, and the family population is more of an issue of poverty, I would say, and lack of affordable housing. And over the years, I don't know. I think the population's been pretty stable. It's grown, but it's like doubled since you have all the borders were opened under the Biden administration, and New York has this right to shelter law, which is not limited to residents of New York. So it was always a situation where people can come from outside New York and get emergency shelter here. But we didn't anticipate people would be coming from Texas or New Mexico straight to New York because they knew about the right to shelter law.
Thanks for listening to the Broker Brunch. We've now brought you a ton of episodes and we hope we're providing a lot of value. If you have any ideas of people you'd like to see on future episodes, please drop it in the comments so we can make it happen. Is that arguably good for business if you're in the support?
If you're in that business, it certainly
right?
is.
But because all of a sudden now there's such a demand for housing,
and we've seen this, with people buying, the developers that are active right now.
I think sure it spawned businesses. Sure. Business will always adapt to needs. Whether the need is from a cash-paying population or a government-assisted population. I shouldn't. I'm sounding. I'm actually like
distinction.
I was a social worker, dude.
Well, I was going to say,
like, I'm not a conservative by nature.
I was going to say, do you think your career may end up a full circle back in public service?
Will I go back public service?
Peter Fine for mayor or president?
When every time I lose money in real estate, I feel like I am in public service. But I am.
It seems like you're passionate about the policy and what's happening in New York, and
there's a certain breed of people that New York City is in their DNA. No offense, but it's usually people born and bred. Although you could be an adopted New Yorker, it's just different. It's a little bit more from the neck up.
How long do you have to live here to become this debate?
Say you become a New Yorker after 10 years of being
10 years? Could be.
But Peter, I think you're saying that there's a distinct subsect of groups, born and bred New Yorker versus maybe someone who is a blow-in or has come to live
No,
here.
there are definitely people who migrate to New York who are suited for this city. It's generally in Manhattan, where one could pursue their ambitions in various fields, whether that's entertainment, real estate, what have you. I'm talking about New Yorkers who grew up in the outer boroughs for the most part, or outside the Manhattan core, who, were riding subways when they were 8 years old, and educated in the school system here, and have seen a few cycles in the city. That's a different kind of New Yorker than you guys or someone else who came here to be a playwright or an investment banker. I mean, yeah, I'll stop myself there. I don't want to offend too many. I'm offending, I think I've offended about 7 or 8 subgroups already. So
Well, definitely the Irish people and not being able to understand them. That was, but you said
Only the
something-
Irish remark was
so you've lost the Irish crowd.
hurtful.
I mean, I don't know how you're going to
I've
operate.
offended.
Yeah.
God knows.
Now, the thing is, one of the things they didn't really, they had a 6 family after renting for a while on Valentine, but it was, my mom and then
so
two,
they had
two
your
uncles.
parents had a building.
Yeah, they had a building on McLean Avenue, but it was one of these things where it was, you got to think about it. It was my mother and father and his 2 brothers, so 4 people owned a 6 unit that pretty much almost occupied the entire thing. And then
So it was like a big house.
And
for
then
them,
on my
basically.
mom's side, because there was no communism in Italy, that was like ground zero for all relatives on my mom's side to come.
So they would land there,
Yeah,
and then find their
they'd
way,
have a place, and then
then
we'd have a place if we had an empty.
Right.
I think we had 2 actually like paying tenants in that. I remember when I was a kid.
right.
So
it was almost like a community service organization.
that was the ground zero for Albanians and Italians eventually.
Yeah.
When Albania didn't become free until it was like 89 or 90. We had over 20. People living in the basement in my house in Yonkers at the time,
Wow.
because my father sponsored probably close to 200 people.
Really, wow.
Personally.
God bless him.
And he
That's
never
a
made
great
more
thing.
than like $30,000 a year. He worked.
He always had a
he'd work
passion
in the
for doing
jewelry
that, yeah.
business. For someone, on 47th, the jewelry district. There.
Right.
So, but he would do things like he would go to an owner of a deli or something and like, hey, you see this kid? I want you to hire him. I'm going to give you the money for 6 months of his salary. Don't tell him.
What?
But I want you to give him a shot. And if you like him, then you hire him or whatever.
That's amazing.
Or help him find an apartment. And he would sponsor or guarantee the rent.
Just because he
until
wanted to see someone get a shot.
He thought of himself, as here's this
Oh,
person
because
coming
he
and
had
doing the same thing.
full circle, right.
He was trying to get me to start doing it. I'm like, nah, hold on, man. I gotta work on myself here. I'm not gonna start.
You were a bit
guaranteeing-
more economical or entrepreneurial than your dad?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I guess what I was leading up to was my dad had that little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit.
He had the spirit, right?
Right, but you got 2 brothers,
Right.
a wife, and you're trying to raise a family. So
Right.
like that.
You have
so
responsibilities,
he
yeah.
had
Right.
responsibilities. So it was like, so he saw that happening with his peers.
Yeah.
And that's why he would say, Marco, remember, this dad's always telling you what to do, but you kind of really watch instead
Yeah.
of listen.
Yeah.
Right? But it took me it finally listened.
Right.
It finally clicked, right? But
He probably gave
was
you that
always-
platform.
Yeah, he would always say, "Hey, buy real estate, do this. You want to start a restaurant or what
Yeah.
have you." So he ultimately sold that building, and bought a house in Yonkers. That was just, it was like a 2-family. I think he put like 60-70% down. Right, we had it paid off. So he would always say, "Hey, listen, I got this house is free and clear. Why don't you do some? We'll pull some money out." So
Yeah.
as I started learning about real estate, of course, then I almost lost everything. I mortgaged the farm. We put a loan on it. I think the first loan was with Greenpoint Bank. If you could just fog a mirror, you were able to get a loan, right? Because it was all equity.
Yeah.
So, the one smart thing I did with that is I bought a co-op on 1111 Midland Avenue. It was part of a sponsor package for like $50,000. Guy bought 19 units for like $190,000 in that building,
There you go.
and he sold 2. So he was into like 17 apartments for like $100,000, right? He lived in Florida. He rented them out. But I somehow miraculously got on the board. Like when I moved in, being a sponsor unit, I didn't have to follow like the board rules or anything like that. So I'm like sliding carpets at like 11 o'clock at night through the window because I was on the first floor. I was doing construction work. Everybody was freaking out. They had an emergency meeting like 30 days into when I moved into the co-op, and the vice president ended up having a heart attack and passed in that time frame. So they had to have a vote. So they're like, okay, who wants to become the vice president of the board? I'm like, I raised my hand. The guy had sponsor shares, so he's like, yeah, he votes me in. in 30 days, I broke every rule moving into the co-op, and now I'm the vice president on the board of directors in this co-op. So, and in that, this was before I got my license, right, like a couple of years before. And in that time frame, we went through 3 management companies. We had to interview. We had to do all the pointing. This is an 81-unit co-op. We had to get rid of a 10,000-gallon underground tank, redo 2 elevators, point the whole building, paint the hallways, go through 3 different supers and management companies. How's that for like a crash course on property management?
Right.
Sitting there, and I'm like, people coming to your door at 2 o'clock in the morning. The neighbor upstairs is like,
Great experience, right?
like,
So you have a reputation throughout your career of buying assets below market value. How do you have the foresight, and what do you look for when analysing an investment opportunity?
Well, those are 2 separate questions in a way. Yes, we do try to buy things where we get a good price. And we define good price in 2 ways. Either we buy very troubled buildings with a view that we can improve conditions, or we buy them for better than what we think the market pricing would be, typically at what we call positive leverage returns. I'll explain both in a minute. When buildings crash and burn, when their values get destroyed, it's often hard to determine what things are really worth. So when things are good, you're in the real estate investment business, you apply cap rates, and it's pretty clear. The income is such and such. It's a cap rate of 7%, 6%, 8%, whatever it is, and it's a formula, as you know. But when things get bad, then it's harder to determine value because, when something is empty or not profitable, it's much harder for the market to determine fair values, and sometimes you can find great buys.
Thanks for listening to the Broker Brunch. We've now brought you a ton of episodes, and we hope we're providing a lot of value. If you have any ideas of people you'd like to see on future episodes, please drop it in the comments so we can make it happen.
What we've found is that the buying pool becomes smaller.
And the buying pool, because it takes a special point of view to be able to do it. I'll give you an example. We just bought a building in Boston. It's on a prime retail street, Washington Avenue. And the building last traded, I think, for $65 million. It's about a 60,000-foot building in a very prime retail location. It had been a Barnes & Noble for 30 years when these people paid $65 million for it. Well, Barnes & Noble moved out pre-COVID. Rents, of course, as a lot of places during COVID for retail, they collapsed, and there were no tenants. So the owners no longer could carry the building because we didn't have the income from Barnes & Noble. They couldn't rent it to anybody else. Building went into foreclosure. We ended up buying it from the bank, who had now sat on it for 4 years or 3 years, for $13 million. We were just the last person standing, down from $65 million. That's a pretty big decline. Now, we happened to know of a tenant that we thought would occupy 2 or 3, take over the retail. Typically, they're a 2 or 3 floor retailer, who we were simultaneously negotiating with. So we had a vision for the building. And in fact, we ended up buying it, and we did sign up the retailer as a major name. And so the building value now is much higher. But, for a long time, people just looked at this building as a disaster. The bank looked at it as a disaster. They didn't want to put any money into it, fix it up. They didn't have the skills to rent it. When banks have buildings, they don't want to put any money into it.
And they don't want to own it, and they don't want to manage it either.
Yeah, so you can't really attract new tenants. I mean, the real estate business. When you put a new tenant in, you got to pay the broker commission, often a substantial amount of money. Often there's work that you have to do for the tenant. Often there's a free rent period. You have to carry it for a period of time. So you got to have money to invest in the building. Well, banks don't like to do that, typically. Once in a while, they might make an exception. So, these are orphans. And if you're in the right place at the right time, you can, with the right vision, you can make some great buys.
So in that instance, you had the inside information to have the right tenant to go in the right building at the right time. And
Well,
how,
you have at least you have a vision for it, Or sometimes we just bought a building outside of Philadelphia in King of Prussia, an office building. Now we all know how difficult the office market is today, but the truth is it's a weird market. There are winners and losers. Vacant office buildings are losers, but there's still some office buildings that are making money. Some are even full, and it's very, very building specific as to what's going on. This building is next to King of Prussia, which is a very strong market. It's the A-plus market outside of Philadelphia. And typically buildings in King of Prussia have traded historically for $200 or $300 a foot, higher than we would normally pay. This building traded, I think, the last time for $180. It was part of a big portfolio of office buildings that the bank ended up foreclosing because some were okay, some weren't. This building was 70% leased and was making a significant amount of money. I think $4 million a year, something like that, on the 70% occupancy.
okay.
We ended up buying it for, my memory serves me, $23 million. And the leases were with excellent tenants, and they were long-term. So for the next I think it has 7 years of average lease term, this building's going to make 15 to 20%.
Sounds like in that instance, your downside risk is protected with only upside.
Exactly. And the market has activity in it, and we're actually negotiating for the remaining occupancy. The building will be a home run. We had to be in the right place at the right time with the guts to sign up while everybody says office is over, it's dead.
Yeah.
You can tear every office building in the country down.
Yeah.
So that's what buying below market or opportunistically means.
9 months to start making business, to start getting deals done. The first year the team was together, we did $800 million. That was the first year at Newmark. Myself, I did good numbers, but nothing close to that.
Because we see a lot of young, I'm sure you've seen the same, a lot of young brokers come and go. They struggle to build a sustainable pipeline of business. That's the biggest challenge for any broker, right? I'm sure debt and investment sales. So I'm really curious, the nuance, what key points helps you build that momentum to do serious business?
So first of all, I learned very quickly, don't waste time. A lot of people will waste your time. And then I learned very quickly, if you don't ask, a closed mouth never gets fed, right? If you don't ask for what you want, then it's never going to work for you. So those are two critical points within the brokerage business. So many people will waste your time and not come through for you. And I learned that very quickly. Like these big developers that just wanted to be wined and dined and wanted to hang out and just, but they were never going to give me the business.
That's like an emotional intelligence skill to see, to read someone, see what they want from a situation. That's an
I know. But if I'm on 3 dinners with you and I haven't signed up a deal with you and you're just wanting me to wine and dine you, then that's not interesting. And then if I've signed up a deal with you, but then you've not gone with me, you've gone with somebody else, then you fool me once, right? Fool me twice, it's on me. Yeah. So I always tell people, I'm not in the fishing business. I'm not here to fish. I'm here to get deals done, right? I'm not interested in chasing blue skies. I want to get deals done. And a lot of guys waste so much time on deals that will never get done. So like a guy wants to buy a property, has no money, don't waste your time. So I learned very quickly, don't waste your time on pipe dreams. Don't waste your time on fishing. Focus on what can be done. And then I focused on the strength. What was my strength? My strength was direct access to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, right?
So you do a lot of multifamily transactions.
So I just focused on the multifamily world. I tried to do a few construction deals in the beginning. They're just too much work, too hard. And so I wasn't interested in trying to do some other deals.
Everyone needs a niche, right?
And I want to be in the multifamily world. And then it was also a perfect storm because let me just finish about Newmark. Sorry. So Anthony said, we're going. I don't want to go. He said, you're coming. And I came. And I'm at Newmark now, and I'm trying to figure out what's my niche. And it was the time when New York was instituting all their draconian rent regulations. Okay. So you had all these New York buyers who own New York Multi now looking outside of New York Multi. Within Newmark, you have this whole network of investment sale brokers all across the US, from Philly, the Carolinas, the Midwest, Texas, Florida. This amazing sales force of guys who sell billions of dollars of multi. So that was my bridge, right? So all of a sudden I had these New York buyers that now were looking for outside. I was like, hey, have you spoken to our broker in Texas? Have you spoken to our broker in San Antonio? Have you spoken to our broker in Columbus? And I would make introductions. And these New York buyers, they typically bought tighter cap rates. They took that New York attitude and they went out to these other markets and got very aggressive. Like hard money is a concept that I would say in 2017, you weren't getting hard money in Chicago. You weren't getting hard money in Columbus. They all said, okay, we're buying the property. We're doing a hard deposit. We're going to close in 60 days. Like that New York aggressive mentality. So we started to build a new vertical together where we acted as kind of like a buyer's concierge for these buyers. So we would find them opportunities. And I still do that till today. I see a deal and so a deal comes down to being sold by the Dallas broker, and I'll look at it and I'll say, oh, this makes perfect sense for this buy. And I'll immediately send him, I said, hey, we should focus on this. This looks like a great opportunity. I'll send it to Cantor, who's now a big buyer of multi. I'll send it, I'll even though they're getting the blast, I'll push it. I'll say, hey guys, we should really focus on this. This one looks like a good one.
So you're working closely with investment sales brokers?
I am. Okay, hand in hand. I spend all my time talking to those guys, seeing where the opportunities are. Deals fall out, deal falls out. I jump on it, right? I'm like, hey, this deal fell out. We need to jump on this. You should be buying this deal now.
There's a real synergy there.
Yeah.
I mean, high level, I think everything that we're selling in 2025 is going to be a win for the buyers. I mean, this is a buyer's market. Cap rates in New York City are as elevated as I can remember since 2010, 2011, 2012, when people were buying 7 caps in place. There was obviously the IAI system back then, and a few things went their way. But when you can buy at cap rates that are this kind of high historically, and there's any type of play or any type of potential lever for future growth, i.e. in rent stabilization, to me it's the makings of a lot of, we're going to sell this deal twice. And a lot of these sellers even know it, or they think it too, but they just can't hold on. So there's so many great assets that are on sale just because of a capital markets issue. It's not like the building's in a problem state. It's just that, the refi options are not good. No one wants to pay down a deal that they already invested into because they think it's good money after bad, even if it's not. There's just a psychology to that. And it's just creating a lot of, kind of opportunity. I mean, where do you see, like if you sold anything this year, like that was 100%, great deal, or are you selling anything now that's 100% great deal?
So one deal that stands out that we closed in March was a retail deal.
Okay.
Below $5 million, but it had the mom and pop tenants who had been there one of the delis had been there for 40 years.
This is in the Bronx?
This was Dykeman Street in Inwood.
Okay.
So it borders like Washington Heights, Inwood. But there's a great stretch on Dykeman that a lot of folks don't know about. And it's like a really like heavy footfall, lot going on. You could go there at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. It's just activity.
Amazing.
And people are spending money. You don't have, Target or Chick-fil-A, but you have like the coffee guy, the laundromat, the Chinese, the clothes fashion store. So there's just a lot of activity. And the buyer for that so it ended up all the local folks came in because nothing really comes up for sale. So they were all like, yeah, I'll pay ask.
Because they know.
They know.
Yeah.
So rents were $50 a foot. Everyone knows it's $65 a foot in the market. The owner profile checked the boxes because they were not in real estate. It was the classic story of someone had bought the building 40, 50 years ago. Now all of a sudden it was left to the kids. They had so much different things going on in their life. Real estate wasn't one of them. Regulation started catching up on them, things they had to do for the building, maintenance. And it was just like, you know what? Let's sell, let's monetize.
So what kind of cap rate starting out that trade at?
So we listed it at about a 6.25 cap, which you probably want to see it 7.5 today, right? For really people, but 6.25 on the basis that the rents were undervalued, that there was meat on the bone here. We got all the local buyers said ask price, we'll pay ask. So I knew that we had it priced properly. All of a sudden, a very active buyer, owns probably 150 properties, never had anything in Upper Manhattan, called me and said, Brian, I'll pay you above ask. Right, so now we had like a good old-fashioned bidding war, which for a mom and pop, felt great. I was like, this is what it's about,
Finally.
But, and the family it was one of those situations. It was like selling for people you wanted to really do well for, because you knew it was their one swing at it. So we got one offer was say 100K above ask, but this particular buyer did everything that was asked of him, did the phase one ahead of time, you know, had his title report done, was ready to post the 10% hard. We sent out blank contracts, blank deposits. He sent his back in 24 hours later. Everything was buttoned up. He was above ask and he was ready to go. So it was just like, I think that's where we're heading for again in the future. We don't know when, but because we're in New York City, because this is where people want to be, if you're a broker now and you can survive this market and have little experiences of that kind of thing, 5-10 years time when things are really humming and when you have those relationships, it's such an incredible opportunity to get in right now.
Oh, 100%. It's never a bad. Same thing with the buyer and the owners, by the way. You know, the peak to peak in New York City is always higher. So the next peak historically has always been higher than the previous peak. Now that might not be the case in every major city. I'm sure it's not the case in, you know, certain pockets of Detroit or whatever. They've gone through cycles, maybe the last. But in New York City, it's always true, and somehow it'll be true again. And so I've talked to some of my partners, you know, Signature Loans and whatever. You know, but if you can survive through this period and not lose assets, or lose one, but like in the general scheme of things, not go down to ashes, chances are you're going to just be in boom times, you know, again in the future. But you got to manage your way through it somehow. And same thing with brokers. There's a magical time in the up cycle where the market's going up, the buyers feel that, the sellers are just happy with $5 more than the last BOV that they had. And there's like an 18 to 24 month window there where it's like a magic carpet ride where both people are very happy and eager to get to a closing table.
Everyone is.
And everything just is smooth. The attorneys, everything's humming, right? And so there's part of the opportunity in New York City is there's so many pent up seller demand. It's like a rubber band that's just so tight. Like you talked about, like these people, it's like pickles past expiration date in the refrigerator. Like we're ready, like we've been ready. We're just not selling at the absolute bottom. But if something picks up a little bit, like we're ready to go. And you know, I think the buyers will be there, whether that's interest rates dropping a little bit, just a slight change in the mechanisms of certain kind of laws. So that will happen eventually, and just you want to be in the right seat as a broker or a buyer and have the infrastructure around you to kind of tap into that because it will happen at some point. And that's kind of what I'm looking forward to, a little bit, because buyers are still scared when they buy stuff for the most part. I mean, they're like, maybe this works out, maybe it doesn't. That's difficult. Cap rates are, I would say, on the whole, between 6% and 7%. There's some stuff at higher cap rates than that for sure, but like a quality building, whether it's a strip center or an apartment building, 6 to 7, and the debt's 6% or higher. So it's not like there's a huge spread, but the cap rates are still elevated. Trump's working hard on getting the interest rates down, and usually he gets his way. So at some point, maybe that just happens, and it's a magical kind of ride again.
You're someone who I actually think is kind of under the radar, even though I know you're out there doing things. But when I read about you and when I see what you've done in the past, like you were going gangbusters, like prior to 2017, buying this regulated stuff like the Del Shah sale, like 50 plus billions, 100 million. You guys were down in Nomad. You had a whole operation set up. I feel like you've had a few different iterations of your life, and you're probably still a pretty young guy.
Yeah, I try to think of myself that way. I mean, that was just different, it was a different time, different business that doesn't exist anymore, right? It's like there's very few people that are still, they can't do what we were doing. It just doesn't exist, right? And people have tried to come and copy, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, you know what? And you learn your lessons, right? You get too big, you get too fast, your overhead, keep overhead low. That's what I've learned from that. And you don't necessarily need like 30 people in the office. You could survive with, like, we had our company lunch yesterday. We have 14 now. So that's just decent. Yeah, it's tiring in a community. Some people that are, just straight accounting, operations, you got to learn these things, right? Like, you got to learn from some mistakes. And
we talk a lot about running a brokerage team in terms of efficiency and how important that is, just maximizing output and, just becoming efficient in everything you're doing in the operations. But going back to the 100 million, that's a big number. You must pinch yourself for that from your humble upbringing.
What was it like on the morning you were closing that deal? $100 million.
That morning, I just treat it like every other morning, right? Like I didn't get too high, get too low, because I still had other things I was dealing with, right? I had other rent regulated buildings. Like that was like maybe a third of what we had left. And those other things, they're just a daily grind of dealing with them, right? You can't get rid of them fast enough, right? It was like 2015 was the height of the market. I don't know when you guys really started.
16, so missed it.
16.
You know,
so
17, yeah.
you're like walking down steps almost, right? In the rent stabilized thing, you're walking down steps from.
All we've heard is the myth of a good market, you know, when it comes to rent stabilized.
It's the worst, right? I mean, is there opportunity? I can't even speak to that because I don't know. Like, I personally don't want to spend my time spending 15, 20,000 on every building that I look at. Because if you look, that's what it's going to cost to do your analysis on each building. So if you did that on 10 buildings a year, where are you making up for that money? Unless you have some big fund. I guess there's a few of them out there. I don't really follow it too much. I just it mystifies me, and I give them unbelievable praise how they're able to do it.
So you timed it very well, though, it seems like, right? If you made the sale at a time when, did you see the writing on the wall? That things were changing?
I know I tried to sell it all in 2016, 2017, but and I just told the story today, there was only like 1 or 2 buyers for like a chunk of it. And they were like 50% less than the asking price of what the broker evaluated at, of what we deemed was the evaluation. So, and also part of it was greed, probably not transacting soon enough, because I should have probably transacted at those numbers and I would have done better. I would have sold off more instead of losing some of them.
So you can understand the psychology then of a seller and a buyer because you've been in.
Now I'm a much I'm a much easier seller, but it's the last 2.5 years when you want to sell something. If you bought something in COVID, you did really well on it, right? But then the interest rates go back up. So it's like, I would love to sell stuff now. You want to sell stuff like now, but you really can't.
It's not that liquid right now.
Right. It's not that liquid right now. So like, I would love to sell a lot, right? And I try to sell a lot. It's just everything's coming in very short or there's nothing.
The buyers, it's depressed pricing, right? Obviously values come down. So
right. And the banks are just, not to sound very negative, because it just happened to me at this retrade. I got retraded. I bought a building yesterday. It's going to be untraded in the next couple of days. A small multifamily building in Long Island. You know, a seller at the last minute says, "Oh, you got to put." The bank says you got to put up this escrow. This thing made us uncomfortable. Some nonsense. So if you're not writing that check, it's not closing. You lose your deposit. So you put up this escrow, and now you got to fight to get it back. But every bank, and what I'm hearing from other people, it's hard. It's very hard to get these deals closed. I mean, you know too. I mean,
it's happening all the time. Banks are retrading the buyers, and I think we won't see a proper, robust market until we see bank competition and we see like actual competitive term sheets. Because right now, you get one term sheet from a bank, the buyer runs with it, hopes to God it's still the case in 60 days or 45 days. Rarely is. You know, even though the Fed is cutting, interest rates are actually going up. So it's kind of, I think until we see the bank side of the equation fixed and the credit markets operating, we're not really going to see a fluid market. Thank you for listening to the Broker Brunch. If you enjoy the show, please hit subscribe so we can reach more people.
Right. And then you have these appraisers, you're basing everything on some guy that doesn't know anything about anything and comes back with something 10% off, you know, and then you have to go back to your seller, right? And then it's or he's going to go back to his investors, or he was going to put this into the deal. It's just all not fun.
Yeah.
What's your feeling where we're at in the cycle right now? You've seen a couple of cycles.
End of 2024, right? We're moving into 2025. What do you think is coming?
I mean, it's got to get better. It can't get much slower, right? I don't know what else to say. But I've seen it. I've seen it in the last couple of months. Even with a couple of Manhattan buildings we were selling, like I got numbers that are offers. We didn't sell it because we don't necessarily have to, but like 20% more than let's say a year ago. I mean, they're foreign. You know, I think there's some foreign people out there, but yeah, it's an anomaly. I think that's an anomaly. Yeah, there's no I don't know. There's no one that could syndicate these deals, right?
It is one thing that I do love about New York, though, despite all the challenges, like there is that get out of jail free card with foreign money or someone who just comes in randomly and
Well, in Manhattan anyway.
in Manhattan anyway, yeah. And maybe not the far-flung parts of the boroughs, but you're going to find someone, you know, not every time, but there's always a chance that you will get lucky because this is Manhattan.
And there's only so few of those buildings left, of those free market mixed use. Even in Brooklyn, how many of those buildings are left? 5,000, 6,000, and those move, right? You see those still moving. They sell for 5 caps, 4 caps, 5, 6.
Because they're generational assets, right? They don't move too often. When they do, someone's going to hold it for a long time.
Someone's going to hold it, or, you know, they could pump the rents up crazy. You know, the rents there go through the roof, or they put a new retail tenant and then they could flip the building in a couple of years. So that I see is, I just don't compete. I just don't compete with it.
You talked about syndication. You're an individual who's syndicated a lot of deals. What advice would you give to a young guy starting out right now looking to syndicate his first deal?
Syndicate their first deal. You got to partner up with people. You know, don't try to keep the whole GP for yourself. Get in co-GPs that can help. You got to partner up. You got to partner up in every respect. So it's like I used to keep 100% of everything, or 50% because I had a partner. But now it's like I could get 10, I could get 15, I could get 20, I could get 25, just to keep. You want to keep things moving. You know, don't hang on to every last dollar or percentage. Because
what would you do if you were that guy or that girl and you were trying to? What stage of the deal do you come in? Like, where can you add the most value? You're trying to get your first deal going. Should you be going out calling owners, see will they sell their buildings? Should you be calling money people to see will they give you money for a deal? Like, where would you start?
If the person was trying to buy their first thing, I mean, I guess it starts with the deal, but they could line up who they're going to call for the money, you know, before, and just and feel these people out and be like, you know, if I get something, you know, can I bring it to you? Obviously, some person that's not going to take it from you. You know what I mean? Like, there's always that concern. For, you know, it's happened to people, but you know, try to line up the deal and the money simultaneously, or start making your list. I mean, I see other people talking about on the podcast, make your lists of all your connections, and if they were in brokerage, you know, it could be people from the brokerage or their clients or parents, friends, whoever. But you got to, you know, people have got to be uncomfortable asking for the money. You know, it's not like you have to be, it's not a natural thing to do. Most people don't want to ask for the money. You know, they feel weird. Right. You know, but
it gets like, easier, I assume, like over and over.
It's just it has to be like second nature. It's, you know, and you're gonna make friends. You're gonna lose friends. It's just the nature of the business. You know, it's a tough fine line between, you know, you have friends and then you have, you know, colleagues. But like, how many friends can one person have, right? Like, these aren't unless you're playing institutionally, it's totally different. Then they're not your friends, right? They're there to look at everything that you're doing, and really, like, I don't want to say you're owned, but like you're kind of working on their platform, so to speak.
Peter, when you and I last spoke, a lot of your investment thesis was based around something's got to change, that the city was heading for, if not already in insolvency. How do you feel about it today?
Same thesis. I've doubled down on that thesis. I think we are in an entirely unsustainable system right now, between interest rates and property taxes and insurance and 2019 rent laws. These are all just squeezing all landlords further and further and further and further. And it's unsustainable. New York City is not in a position as a government entity to take over all private housing. And the banks are, you know, really beginning to foreclose and feel the pain. Foreclosures are through the roof. Bankruptcies are through the roof. It's just going to continue if nothing within that unsustainable system changes. And, you know, for us, we have a very long runway because we were fortunate enough to have today's basis. If you're unfortunate enough to have purchased, you know, something between 2012 and 2022, or you just simply levered up over that period of time when interest rates were lower, I mean, you know, we're buying debt at 40 and 50% discounts right now on more of this kind of product. Because
which is interesting because at a 40, 50% discount on the debt, that's 50% of the value. So you're talking about buying property for 25 or 30 cents on the dollar.
Yes, in some instances, for sure.
We all love New York, but sometimes to me, it just feels like New York City cannot get out of its own way. Peter mentioned 2019 HSTPA. In 2022, 421A expired. They let it expire. In 2024, they bought out 485X, a really watered down version that really hasn't caught fire yet. And now in 2025, it looks like the Democratic nominee is a socialist, an actual socialist, not just something we're saying is a socialist. So when you think about all of that, we love New York despite all these challenges. Do you think that New York City can be saved, Bob?
I think it absolutely can. Don't forget the political pendulum historically shifts over time. I would say that pendulum is heavier now than it's ever been in my career. I've been doing this 41 years now, and
that's an impactful statement.
It is a very, very heavy pendulum. But look, things were so bad during the Dinkins administration that it created an opportunity for someone like Giuliani to get elected. And it could be that the silver lining, if our socialist/communist nominee gets elected, that things might get bad enough that the pendulum will swing. Something has to be done to make that pendulum swing. But if you think about it, we're in an environment with housing where price controls are creating scarcity. Public policy is creating scarcity. When you have a real estate market that functions with a higher correlation to public policy than supply and demand, you got problems. And price controls lead to scarcity. We have scarcity in housing. Why is it that in new construction apartments today, rents in Manhattan are now over $150 a square foot? How do you afford paying $150 a square foot? Well, you do that because supply is so constrained that you have to bid up. The few things that are remaining are priced extraordinarily high. And to the extent that a rent freeze kicks in for 4 years, which is what Mamdani has pledged, that's kind of the third nail in the coffin for rent-regulated housing in the short term. I agree with Peter's thesis that it is a great time to buy only because you're buying buildings at less than land value. Forget about less than replacement cost. This is less than land value, a lot of these buildings. So I think inherently that is a good basis, and things have to change because they're not sustainable. So I agree with Peter's thesis completely, but I think there's still a lot more short-term pain to go through. But we need policy that really will make the city more affordable. If our politicians really, truly wanted New York City to be more affordable for everybody, we would have a tax abatement program for new construction that looks more like 421A than 485X. We would have folks wanting new supply in their districts, even if it was going to bring in voters that don't know them and might not vote for them. We would have an MCI and IAI program. Look, that program was probably, those two programs, probably the most effective housing programs the city has ever implemented. In 1978, the dilapidation rate in New York City's housing stock was 14%. So 14% of the housing units were deemed uninhabitable because they were in such bad shape. So the MCI program and the IAI program come along, incentivize the private sector to dump tens of billions of dollars into the housing stock. So in 2019, the dilapidation rate in New York City was 0.04%. Great for everybody. Great for tenants, great for quality of life, living conditions, everything. And HSTPA neutered both of those programs. So now the buildings are deteriorating. There's no incentive to invest capital in the buildings. And it's creating worse conditions for tenants. So if you really want New York to be more affordable, create more supply, bring back the MCI and the IAI the way it used to be to get the private sector investing in the housing stock again. I mean, these are no-brainers. The only reason that you wouldn't possibly want that to happen is because you're afraid you won't get as many votes by not protecting the million people that live in rent-stabilized housing, which is a very energized voter base. But look, let's not bullshit anybody. It's all about getting votes. It's not about caring about the tenants or the quality of life or affordability. That's all BS. It's all about votes. The whole thing is about votes.
By looking at the deal that's in front of you and deciding what
Try
the
to make
best way to
something
skin
out
this
of.
cat.
Try to make something out of a good deal.
Yeah.
Right. Try to make something because you have now you're paying for your own office.
Right.
You want to have at least some sort of person working for you.
Yes.
Right. If you don't have the brokerage revenue stream anymore, like I remember after I left Marcus, I was sitting in my apartment just cold calling clients, people, this, that, just trying to figure out like what the heck am I going to do with my life?
I mean, I remember walking into your office this is probably 2014. I mean, you then eventually set up like a brokerage team in your office to find deals.
Yep.
I remember there was like 10 people at desks just cold calling.
Interns, free labor, whatever you could do. And just like brokerage, most people don't survive, right? Like people come, they would quit after 2 weeks, right?
Yeah,
It's people would
hard.
just disappear overnight. It's the same thing. It's all about brokering, right? At the end of the day, you're always brokering.
You went on a great run and had a ton of success, and I know we've chatted about that before. If we fast forward to Hildreth Real Estate Advisors, your shop today, what's it look like?
I mean, it's a pared down version. Obviously you learn from your mistakes, right? You make mistakes along the way, try to keep overhead low, salaries low, a core group of people that have a similar type of vision. But, I'm still out there canvassing directly for deals in a more modified way. Direct mail is always something I've always done. I still do it in a very direct type of way. But I also, I'm not like necessarily looking for a 5 cap, moving it to a 7 or an 8. I'm looking for more cash flowing because, investor bases change over years and you can only do what your investors want. And most investors want distributions, right? Like everyone's focused on distributions, especially now when people can invest in private credit getting 8, 9, 10, 11%, or they can invest in hard money loans, right? At first position, why invest in the equity and try to make like 15, 20 when you can get almost like a guaranteed 8 to 12. So I have to compete against all these other things. I have to try to at least get people like a 6, 7, 8 plus upside to make the deals even relevant. And that's why it's also been more difficult to do certain things lately in real estate. Sometimes you have to get a little more outside of the comfort zone and step into businesses and things like that, which I've done, but it's just like anything. It's work, it's management intensive, and it's tough.
Brandon, for you, just switching back to Avison Young, you were recently promoted to head of the sales group there. Congrats on that. You're a humble guy. You didn't bring that up yourself, so I'm going to bring it up for you. But congrats on that. But I'm wondering, when you move over, like David hit on it there a little bit, from maybe just focusing on getting deals done to actually like leading a group or hiring.
Yeah.
Is a lot of your time spent now managing rather than producing, or how do you split up your day?
No, yeah. My thing, and I've told Avison Young this, and I tell anyone this, like, my time is best spent doing what I think I do best, which is sourcing business and executing business. And honestly, like valuing property, understanding market dynamics. I think it's important to, I don't want to say outsource because it's on our team, but we have a head of operations. Obviously, James does promotional efforts for our team. He's very, very, very good at videos and podcasts and those sorts of things.
Good front office man, I
Perfect.
feel, right?
Yeah. And my biggest thing is lead by example. So, I mean, I will say this is an anecdote, but I have an office. I still sit in the bullpen and I let anyone use it if they want to make calls in there with quiet. I like to be in the mix. I think it's good to, you can't expect someone to work their tail off if you're not doing it yourself. So that's my thing, is I'm just going to put my head down. If someone has a question for me, I will answer them. But I also I expect direct questions to provide direct answers. And it's funny, when I started my first internships were at Silverstein Properties, and there was a great guy named Jeff Grasso. And Jeff, what I liked about him is I was like he was such a good mentor. And I was like, how can I be like Jeff? He's like a young killer. He now is doing crazy projects out west. And Jeff was like, you have to give me 10 questions a week and we'll go through them. He took my mouse away so I would learn Excel without a mouse. But it was a lot of just like throwing me into the fire and making me come up with questions. And I think if someone's like giving you work, if you're not trying to figure things out yourself, you'll never actually learn it. If you're forced to ask the questions and understand something or see what someone else is doing and trying to emulate that, so to speak, I think that'll, advance someone's career more than going into a training session and, you can sit next to me and listen to me on the phone, right? Like I can't replicate what I'm doing in a training session, and people kind of space out in those things anyway. So yeah, a lot of it's just leading by example. And then again, if someone has a question for me, I will answer them in 10 seconds. But if someone just like wants advice, I struggle with that.
That's interesting that you've kind of separated that in your head. So sounds like what I'm hearing is you're good in the bullpen if it's like, Brandon, the owner just said this, what should I say? Bang, you got it.
Correct.
But if I come to you, I'm like, Brandon, I'm not sure, how to progress in this business. You almost need
I would be like, yeah, that sounds terrible. I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know how to.
It's two different skill sets, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't have that second one. That's a James, a Paul. There's certain personalities that are great at that, and I can't sit here and say that I am. I'm more of like the technical questions.
Yeah,
interesting.
I would say I'm in that realm. Yes, I know exactly what to say to the seller, how to work around certain situations, but like, yeah, you're supposed to have sympathy and empathy and all this stuff, but like,
you also need to be effective. And
you got to put in the work.
Right.
Like, if you're not going to put in the effort and the work, and if you're not going to respond quickly, like that's the other thing. Like the people that don't respond quickly, those are
100%.
You got to respond quickly. I don't know. You got to be on the ball. That's what
if I'm working for David and he asks me a specific question and it's like a text, I will respond.
Oh my God. You and Noah. That's why I work with the people that
like 10 seconds.
You gravitate towards the people that you're just never going to, no one's going to respect you not answering for a day. Right.
First off, it was really interesting working with my father, and I am appreciative and thankful on a daily basis, still to this day, that I had that opportunity to work with him. But perhaps like your father, my father worked. Like that's what he did. And, I got up for school and left at 8 o'clock in the morning. He was always gone. He was like, without question, because he was in the office by then. And so the time that I actually got to spend with my father as a kid was Saturdays. And very often on a Saturday, if we weren't, he had a place up in Massachusetts, but if we didn't do that, he worked. And we would have a bagel or something at 8 in the morning, and then we'd walk down to his office at 595 Madison Avenue, which was the Fuller building, still is the Fuller building. And Leslie would do some paperwork, and then we would go show properties. And I was sort of like his cute little sidekick, and he'd be showing on a Saturday typically. And then we would typically walk up Madison Avenue. My father was a passionate collector of art, and we'd stop in at the different galleries and go to Sotheby's Park Bernay, which at the time was on Madison Avenue, and then end up at the Metropolitan Museum very often, and just kind of wander the galleries. But it mattered because real estate was always part of my life. If you went for a walk with Leslie, it was always an education. He would say, so-and-so lives here, so-and-so lives there. I sold this building to the government of Iran. I sold that property to, I don't know, Hugh Hefner, whatever, whoever it was. And he really instilled in me this notion of, you don't just show up and you're like, hey, you want to look at this? Hey, you want to look at that? You really needed to know and understand the product. And real estate's super simple. And I always tell people in my office, don't over-intellectualize it. It's simple, there are assets, but you do need to understand the assets, because in telling a story, which may very well be the provenance of a building, of a townhouse very often, who was it built by? When was it built? Who were the owners? What did they do for a living? Because making that story makes things more interesting, and you want to pull the customer into these things.
And when someone's about to write a pretty big check, I feel like they almost, a little bit different to my world in investment sales, but they almost want to be a part of a story or to understand the history.
They absolutely do. And there are certain blocks where you can say to someone, oh yeah, there's a Goldman partner over there, and this guy's in the private equity business, and this guy's, I don't know, has a fashion brand, and this woman's an actress. Those are things that really resound with people and really make a difference to them when making a decision, because I think ultimately all of us want to be included in something. And it may be very often with real estate because you want to be part of a wealthy club.
And something bigger than yourself as well.
And absolutely.
Right.
Something
Legacy.
bigger than, yeah.
And if you buy a piece of Manhattan like that, it's a different feeling, I think, compared to a condo or a co-op where you're buying into a community maybe. When you're buying a townhouse, you're really buying a little piece of the island.
You are, and you're also buying a certain personality type, because I think that, very often, certainly traditionally, townhouses were represented independence. Getting into a co-op, big deal. Buying an apartment, big deal. But having a townhouse was sort of like, look, I'm living in my own world. I'm living in my own space. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. It was also sort of a bastion of people who couldn't get into good buildings. I mean, so it was a combination of the two things. I think that has changed over time. I think that there was a long period where townhouses were a great way to graduate from a classic 6, classic 7 apartment, whether it was on Park Avenue or Fifth Avenue or Central Park West, into, a place with 5 bedrooms or something, an outdoor space. And I think that made a big difference to people. That said, with the coming of guys like Gary Barnett and now Naftali, who are building these huge apartments, 5, 6 bedrooms, it's actually detracted to a certain degree from townhouses, because people are like, if I buy a house, I've got to renovate it. Who knows what's going to happen with the city? It's a big pain in the butt. I'll just buy something that's done. Someone's giving me the key. But the key to that is that builders are building much larger apartments now. Whereas for years and years, new condominiums would be like 40 studios, 81 bedrooms, 102 bedrooms. And that was it. Nobody was building bigger units. So that's made a big difference.
My mindset towards customer is such a human business. It really is.
That's the word.
Humanizing.
Yeah. Yes, and humanizing.
Thank you. And I was so taken back. When I joined the industry, it was like you had to be authentic. If you weren't authentic, you were going to get weeded out. And it didn't matter. Really? Everyone had a different kind of strategy or mindset to brokerage, but they were all true to themselves. So the best brokers, you look at James, you look at Steven, they were very different in their execution, but they were authentic, and I think that's something that you really need to hold on to as a broker. And that allows you to connect with customers in just more effective ways. And it's also we were blessed that we had this integrity just embedded in us, because it was at the core of what Massey Knakal was this seller rep integrity, and execution and work ethic integrity. And as I'm getting to get more exposure to these young people coming into this industry, is they're so moldable, and you can mold them the wrong way or you can mold them the right way. And so
there's a responsibility with that.
It's really interesting, and they don't even notice. I'm like, you can't do that, and you won't do that again. And they're like, of course I won't do that again. And
right.
I believe them.
It's like having a dog, right? It's like having a puppy.
And I'm about to get a dog, I think.
Right.
I hope my daughter's not watching this, but I think she
watches
subscribes.
my podcast.
But I think about that. I'm like, look, you gotta you know, you really got to show them the way. And we were blessed that we had that.
Listen, think about when you were 22 and you came out of college, you thought you were an adult, but you're really so young, and your impressions of the world are still being presented to you. And so if not for the opportunity to work with the folks that we did, it's very easy to create bad habits. It's very easy to be lured towards short-term interest instead of long-term gain. And
especially
so,
when you're asking them to work as hard as they are.
Right.
You know, like we have a big cold call culture. It's like, look at Matthews, you probably think cold calls, you know? And we train our new people to originate. They learn execution through their mentors, right? They learn the culture through the relationships within the firm. So, you know, when you're asking somebody to make 500 phone calls a week, 1,000 phone calls a week sometimes, they lose the human component of that. And that's what, you know, a good mentor will do, or a good leadership will do, is try to keep that integrity in place.
I think from the outside looking in at Matthews, one thing you've done really well is like you've linked the process to the overall benefit. Yeah. Like, and I think Kyle Matthews does a really good, he's all over my social media. Like every time I open it, Kyle Matthews is there. But you can see like there's a guy who has walked the walk for so long, kind of like you, Stephen. But now he's, you know, when he talks or when he says something, you kind of say, he's not just someone who's like reading it out of a book. He's done it himself. Yeah. You kind of, to me, Matthews seems like you do the blocking and tackling really well. Like you've got a good hustle mentality in early, stay late. And I feel like young people just buy into that so much because they, like you said, they want to give their time and their energy to something. Thank you for listening to the Broker Brunch. If you enjoy the show, please hit subscribe so we can reach more people.
I felt like we lost that a little bit after COVID. You know, I think people got on their heels, they stopped going to the office, and a lot of people weren't forcing that correction. I think Kyle, like unapologetically, was like, we're not subscribing to that. And he was a 2004. He started in 2004. You look at some of the greatest brokers in our industry. 2004 was the year that they started because they just learned so much. They learned how to grind at a very early age. And so he's taking that through to his CEO role. Like he'll come to our office and he'll give tutorials that I am pumped. I walked out of that room and I'm just like, I just.
Is it like a football coach type of mentality?
Yeah.
Yeah, where you want to run through all after speaking to him?
Yes. He takes his name very seriously. You know, he grew up in a football family. So when it comes to like discipline, training, never quitting, you know, these are things that are just constantly like ingrained in the culture.
A lot of transferable skills.
Yeah, and like at Massey Knakal, we hired a ton of athletes too. Athletes they're competitive, but they know how to be a teammate. So you need competitive people, but you also need collaboration. And the only way that really works is through good leadership. And so, you know, he's this interesting hybrid of all these different leaders I've met over the course. He's our age. And
your age.
He reminds me.
Don't drag me down.
You know, I see like Bob Knakal in him and Paul, and like I see Steven. Like I see all of these great brokers that I've known over the years, kind of, you know. And so again, he's just one of those influencers that I take, and it becomes part of my pitch also.
By the way, side story about, you know, being conscientious of who you hire. The office had hired someone who was a salesman, right? He was the #1 medical office salesman in Ohio. Okay, and it comes to New York. Do you know the story?
No.
He comes to New York and wanted to move into brokerage, and so, you know, immediately we were receptive to him for his resume, right? Yeah. And so, but some things that don't translate and that we didn't recognize is that he was petrified of the phone. This was like a, you know, whatever, 30-something-year-old man literally crying because he had a phobia of the phone.
Right.
So what doesn't translate is he made all of his business in medical office in person.
Yeah.
So he was a door-to-door salesman. And so he was good at this, and he didn't know how to get that same door-to-door connection with real estate owners. And that's why it required phone calls, right? And so he was petrified. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. But to your point, you've got to find people who are going to find the pathway to make
There's a balance, right? And you can't exclude. You have to be likable. You have to approach presentations with finesse and with preparation. And I fall, victim to this, where it's like I'm not making enough phone calls, and it clearly reflects in your OV origination and then ultimately your income. So it's like whether it's 30% of what you do or 70% of what you do, like it is critical that it is a part of your brokerage approach. It's just picking up the phone and hitting some cold calls. So it's something that I've gotten better at just in the last 2 years of being at Matthews. Like where before it was like, oh, how can I get creative with my mailers? How can I get creative with my case studies? Okay, well, I've done that. Now what? It's like, you got to get it out there and you have to have these conversations. But, Bob will say it's like 50 connections a week. That's more effective than 500 cold calls, right? But like, how do you get to that 50 connections a week?
And you have to be authentic to yourself. I feel like you hit on that as well. Like what Stephen was saying, if meetings work for that guy, then you have to find a way to get in the room with folks.
Correct.
It's not that you can't do brokerage. It's just that you need to find your angle. Some folks are killers on the phone. Some folks just crush meetings. But whatever it is in this business, one thing that I always love about it is there's a role for everybody.
Yeah.
Whether you're analytical, whether you like pitching, whether, there's something in it.
I was in a meeting just the other day I was at a brokerage firm, but a credit broker, right? So a debt broker. And so some of the folks wanted to talk to me, and he was like, hey, he has his call list, and he was looking for recommendations for me, and here's all my developers, and he was having a hard time connecting with them. So somewhat similarly, I said, you've just provided for me your own list of developers and all their projects. I said, where do they go to work every day? On site, right? You know where their sites are.
Right.
I said, you need to get out of the office and you need to get into the street and show up at their office. Mm-hmm. And for a debt broker who was, reasonably mature, I was like, that wasn't connecting with him.
Yeah.
And I was like, turn this computer off and go out there and visit every project.
Sometimes that's required. I know for myself even, like there's a comfort to going in, drinking your coffee at your desk, pulling up your screens, and you have your whole control panel right in front of you. But then sometimes you go out into the field, or you even just going for lunches, or you go out for happy hours, and you just start connecting with the people that you're trying to do business with. It's so much more enjoyable. I get so much energy from it. And every time I do it, I'm like, I need to do this more. I need to do it more.
It's why I'm in this business.
Right.
I'll schedule a day where I'm just out in the neighborhood all day long, and it just rejuvenates me. Like once every 2 weeks, I just need to be out there for the entire day, just working from my car. Right. And it's like Paul always said, it's like you never walked away without finding a lead. You see a for sale by owner, you connect with a super, like it
Supers are always around,
always ends to something. I was in like South Bushwick at this like dodgy deli getting a coffee. And I turn around and I like bump into a client who owned a development site, a big development site. He probably is in Bushwick once a year. And he's like, DJ. I'm like, hey, what's going on, Adam? I'm like, how you doing? And we talked and whatever. And then a year later, he calls me. He's like, I want you to sell my development site. He's like, I could hire X, Y, I can hire all these great brokers, but like I would have never run into any of them at a bodega in South Bushwick. Like you were in your hood. Like that's the type of person I want to hire. So
good story.
It's a good story. I think about it, and I tell the young guys, I'm like, like we had guys at Knakal that like got physically hurt canvassing their markets, because they had to do it. They had to canvass 500 properties, 1,000 properties.
Yeah.
And like they're like, like their livers were hurting like after a month of like just walking and walking and walking. But like that's the point. You got to be in your hood.